Hello and welcome, everyone. It's Darius Barazandeh. Thank you for tuning in and connecting today. We are live with Lynn Waldrop, and we are super excited because we are going to be breathing in a new life, a new energy, and a new set of possibilities energetically through today's session. Now, one of the things I do want to mention, of course, we're seeing a lot of changes on the planet. There's no doubt. There's a lot of things coming forward. There's a lot we've moved through to get to this point. And the real question is, what is happening to our bodies, to humanity, to our energy systems, and how do we stay healthy? How do we stay aligned? How do we stay vibrantly aligned to our best life in these times? Because I think we're going to go through some ups and downs on the planet. And one of the areas we're going to be looking at is airflow. And also, what is it that could be blocking that natural reservoir of energy that we actually can get from the air, from this natural oxygenation that we all need? And our guest today is Lynn Waldrop. We're going to be diving into breathing in new life, and we're going to be talking about all of it today. So go ahead and send in your questions. If you are live on our Zoom session, for those of you lucky enough to do that, you're going to be able to raise your hand. So go to reactions, raise your hand. If you're listening on another platform, you're going to want to jump in and make sure you can get to our live Zoom call whenever you can, because that's where you can ask the questions and get the support. Now, our guest today is medical intuitive Lynn Waldrop. She's known as the Body Channel. She's worked with over hundreds of thousands of clients in over 171 countries. 30 years of energy healing experience in energy work. And what makes her so unique is that she's a medical intuitive. She's able to dive in and connect with the bodies and the energy fields that are in those bodies. And she gets specific God-guided information to the dissonance, to the distortion in the bodies, so that she can help people along the path to spiritual and physical well-being. Bodies will open up to the root of the issue, sometimes down to the cellular or DNA level. And I want to share one quick story, and then we're going to dive right in. One person said, wow, been using the program with great results. My teeth feel whiter. My hair feels like it's growing. My skin looks plumper. My vitamin D levels going up, and I sleep just through the sound of your voice. Thank you so much to what you're doing, for all you're doing to make our lives better. So without further ado, let's jump in with Lynn Waldrop. Lynn, welcome to day one of UWealth Revolution.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I love the UWealth Revolution community. I wish everybody blessings for 2025.
Absolutely. I do too. And it's unbelievable we hear. And that kind of gets me to where I wanted to start from is we've been through a lot. Like we've been through a lot of energy changes, a lot of trauma, a lot of turmoil, lots of things. What's happening on the planet, and how does this maybe relate to our consciousness as you see it, Lynn?
There's lots of things going on. A lot of people finally come out of some of the fear that we had from COVID, from, being isolated and things like that. But then there's other fears and other stressors and pressures that are going on from wars around the world and changes of political figures and all of that. So, you know, I think just a standard that we're always talk about is our stress levels and what you're doing to maintain your world, where you stand, no matter what's going on around you, whether it's on a personal level or a worldwide level. What can you do to keep yourself in check and not get wrapped up in all of that and still love your life and live your life and be healthy and stay healthy throughout all of that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at one level, we're evolving as humans through consciousness, but at another level, some people aren't making it. I mean, there's a lot of people leaving the earth, a lot of unexplained, declines in vitality. Let's just put it that way. And I think the big question is like, what's really going on? Or is it a culmination of a lot of things that just have kind of been brushed under the rug, and now it may be time for us to deal with them? And that's why we love doing the show. But what would you say about that?
Yeah, there's so many different things. One of the reasons why I wanted to do lungs was because of all the chemtrails that we have going on and the fog. I don't know if everybody has the fog, but Florida, we have this fog and they've tested it and it's got a bunch of parasites and bacteria in it. And you've got the fires out west, and, there's fires going on in North Carolina and probably in different parts of the world too, that we're
Yes.
not even being told in the United States. So there's all kinds of things that are going on that are affecting our bodies. So we have all of this chemical infiltration, whether it's through the air we breathe, through our food supply, through even just the vaccines that a lot of people took from COVID. You know, there's so much research that's coming out now. It's creating so many different things in terms of autoimmunes and all of that. And I know clients are really tired of hearing about that, you know, especially Americans. We kind of like, once something's done, we want to just be done with it and put it under the table. But unfortunately, you know, a lot of these things we can't. We don't want to eat all these seed oils. They're going to haunt us. The vaccines, they're going to haunt us. There's so many different things that if we do them, they're going to haunt us down the road. So it's better that we face it and go, okay, so what changes can we make on a personal level? And then what energetically can we do to try to fix the problems that we've created so that we can move on with a healthier body?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, even just a fire that you would think, okay, it's a wildfire, but you start to have electric cars with these batteries that have all sorts of chemicals in them that can make the area like a toxic waste dump, and then you've got EPA issues, but then you have a lot of that airborne particulate now reaching people. And even if you don't live in an area where that fire is, that's getting into the atmosphere. A lot of people have been talking about this fog that actually, like, it's just odd. It's just weird. It doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. What are your thoughts on that? Is that parasitic? Is there something just being placed in that fog, do you think? Or do we even
They've
know?
tested it here in Florida, and
Okay.
it's I've lived here for almost 8 years now, and I've never seen anything like it. Like I live in a high spot, and there is a lake, you know, down the hill, but I've never had fog come up the way that we've had it in the last couple of months. It's just bizarre, and it sits there for almost the whole day, and the skies are gray like they used to be when I lived in Pennsylvania. That was, you know, a common thing there. It's not common here. So people tested it, and it has a lot of the bacteria that causes mycoplasmic pneumonia. And there is a
Okay.
huge rash of people in Florida that, you know, they have walking pneumonia. They have this chronic cough they just can't get rid of. And it actually is a walking pneumonia. And the speculation is a lot of it is coming from this weird fog. So where's all this coming from?
Hmm. Yeah, you had mentioned in your notes, I believe, that this microplasma pneumonia was up ninefold this year. I
Yeah.
guess in your area, nine
No,
times.
in just countrywide and United States
Wow.
wide, it's up ninefold.
Yeah, don't
Now
you just want
remember
to?
after
Yeah.
COVID, we never had the flu and we never had a common cold. Remember, like it just was taken out of the equation. So this can be that now cyclically we're going back to more like pneumonias. But I even had a friend that lived in LA, and while her house wasn't affected by the fire, when they went to go back home, the smell and particulates from the fire were so embedded in their house that they had to have a professional company come out and clean. And in some places, they even had to take down the sheetrock and put up new because they just couldn't get that out. Meanwhile, that's what they would be breathing in if they have their heating and air systems on. It's just recirculating. And how many people can maybe afford to go and have one of these companies come in? They're very expensive. So even though the fire may not have affected them, the particulates from it is something that, you know, might affect them for the rest of their lives
Yeah.
if they're staying in their home.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very interesting time. And like, as all these things happen, one of the things that we always say at U Wealth Revolution is that consciousness rises and we adapt, our awareness expands to meet what's going on the planet. And so whenever you see challenges or turmoil, even in your own life, it's a great adage to remember that your consciousness is going to adapt, expand, and become more aware, more powerful to meet that situation, to meet that demand. And Lynn, for people that are new or listening to this snippet of the interview that they're going to get, what would you, how would you describe yourself? People call you the body channel. You're able to go in and through kind of this God, derived vision of what's going on, help people. Tell us a little bit about your work really quick.
Easiest way I can describe it is I can sit down and have a conversation with your body, just like you and I are having a conversation right here. So it takes a little bit of multitasking because, in general, I'm having a conversation with you. You may be telling me what's going on with you, but the body's telling me its opinion of what you're saying, and then it's giving me its opinion of what it thinks is the problem. And so it's like being a detective where bodies just don't seem to have all the pieces. But once you can work with it and collaborate with it and go, look, what about this? What about this? And all of a sudden it realized, oh, that's what I need right there. That's the problem. Then it can really go on a pathway of trying to heal itself. And so that's really, to me, what the job is being that detective, working with your body to figure out the missing pieces and what things can be changed. And then using that God-given energy, what can we give the body that will nourish it so that it can make that change?
Yeah. And we say here, the old adage that everything is energy. So we look at the energetic alignment, the energetic component of this, where everything begins. And sometimes things like grief and thoughts and feelings and emotions and trauma can play a big part in this. I do want to talk about one big elephant in the room, and that is, parasites and bacteria and even different diseases. I mean, we find that the lack of oxygen, the lack of sufficient oxygen tends to be the culprit behind a lot of systemic issues that can really affect people's health. Explain a little bit more about that.
So you have to remember that so many things that we see these days is all marketing. So I really want people to start using some discernment with a lot of things going on. And why I say that is everybody's heard of the whole alkaline water. Oh, I have to have alkaline water. We've been doing this for what, 10 years now or more. Well, the whole purpose behind that was if your alkalinity is high, that means the pH level of the water is high. That is supposed to be, when you drink it, raise the alkalinity level in your body, i.e., raise the pH in your body. Okay. It doesn't work that way. Let me just say that. That's a misnomer. It really doesn't, just because you drink it, get to wherever you have little acid pools in the body. But the premise of it is that you want to raise the alkalinity and the pH in your body, because when you do that, that creates a highly oxygenated environment. That's the whole purpose of that whole marketing scheme, is to create a highly oxygenated environment in your body, because cancer can't live in a highly oxygenated environment. Parasites, bacteria, viruses, any kind of pathogen, they cannot live in a highly oxygenated environment. So the more that and that's the whole reason why you hear ozone treatments and colonics and all these things where they're using oxygen of some sort, trying to raise that oxygenation. That's the purpose of it, because those things cannot survive in it. Your body thrives in it. So you want to do it to make your body thrive and not allow these things to then seep in and get into certain areas and cause problems in certain tissues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we think about what's going on with our bodies, we want to magnify all of this oxygenation to keep ourselves healthy. We don't often look at the lungs. You dove into the lungs. In fact, I think the body's directed you. We got to look at these lungs. So, what was important about the lungs as you started looking into this with your intuition and with your awareness?
So many clients and so many people that I know have this like chronic cough. And, they're saying that it's a long-term COVID symptom these days. But I don't buy it. We need to get past it. We need to get it under control. I actually have a friend who's going to be on the transplant list for a double lung transplant because of various things. To get on the transplant list, she had to have every COVID shot that they have on the market, including all of the boosters. They won't even let you on the transplant list without having all of these, which is just criminal, because you're going to kill her before she actually gets a new set of lungs. So we have to go in and we have to look at what are all the things that are causing this. And again, we've listed a bunch of them: the chemtrails, the fog, the spike protein, the COVID that's around, the shots. There's just so many things, the fires, there's so many things going on in our air, the chemicals that we breathe all day. I've talked before about how it was so surprising to me that I was a swimmer for most of my life till I went to college. And I never thought about clearing the chlorine out of my tissues and especially out of my lungs because of being in chlorinated water for several hours a day for my whole
Yeah.
life. So there's a lot of things we don't think about that, when you go through this process, all of a sudden your body goes, wait a minute, how about that? But then on top of that, those are all the physical pieces. But Darius, you and I have had many conversations about And this one's kind of the cliche, but how much there is the sadness and the grief that people have
Yes.
from the COVID time, or from traumas they've had from when they were little, or from the isolation, from losing jobs, from relationships, whatever it is. So what are you trapping in your lungs? For
Mhm.
me, I had chronic bronchitis most of my life, because it was like every time I broke up with a boyfriend, or my mother was disappointed in me, I had this thing about disappointing her. I literally would get bronchitis. So I'd have it 4 to 8 times a year. I mean, that's incredible. Once I
Wow.
realized that that was the problem, I barely ever get bronchitis anymore. You've got to clear out all of that emotion, clear out whatever the trauma is, the stressor, the pattern, get rid of all that, and you don't have to continue to have whatever that problem is anymore. And then you got to clean up the bronchi, so you'll get rid of the damage. And that's what we're gearing towards here.
I want to get to the 7 primary functions of the lungs, because I think as we move through this time on Earth, it's going to be really important that we stay fully oxygenated, we stay fully in our power and in our health. But for those that are maybe unfamiliar with how mother's disappointment or the breakup of a boyfriend could later turn into potentially the energy environment where bronchitis could thrive and take over. How would that work, Lynn? How does that connection happen?
Everybody processes things different, and I call it, you like stuff things down. Everybody
Yeah.
stuffs emotions. We've heard of that before. For me, for whatever reason, it was, I was disappointing my mom. I wasn't getting the love from her. She would push away and be like, you did something wrong. Instead of it being, I did something wrong, it was, I am wrong. You guys see the difference between the two,
Yes.
right?
It's like a
So,
label,
yeah,
right?
it becomes me, my identity. I'm just wrong, right?
Mm.
So when we do things like that, a lot of times we then stick them in a tissue somewhere. Some people may take that same thing and stick it in their big toe and have gout. For me, I stuck it in my lung tissue and literally just had a hard time breathing. I had a stint of asthma for a while. I went through having bronchitis so many times.
Mm.
But think of even all the little words we say, like takes my breath away, right?
Yeah.
He or she takes my breath away. So there's a lot of things, phrases that we use that actually kind of translate and correspond back to our bodies. So one of the most common things is things having to do with love have a tendency to kind of go to the heart lung kind of area. Now, I
Yes.
don't in general put labels like that, right? But this is one that it is pretty common. So sadness, loss, grief, abandonment, all of those kinds of things, people have a tendency to kind of put in that heart lung area.
Yeah, and we are getting to a point now where, and let me know what your thoughts are on this. Write to us wherever you're listening. I'll read the comments. Do you feel like things, old memories, old emotions, old situations are coming into your memory more and more recently? And if they are, let me know. But what I've seen with a lot of people all over the world is that this is coming up to be processed, so we can shed the old layers and now acclimate to a new level of energy, to a new level of vibration, kind of like taking off the old jacket so we can put on a new one. We've got to be aware of what was there, what we've been wearing, what we've been holding in our body. That's why I believe it's coming up. And let me know, everyone, if that is something you're seeing in your world or in your life or with your family and friends. And a lot of people saying, yes, yes, it's all popping up.
Oh, I
I
love
love
that.
that.
Get it off your chest. I didn't even think of that one.
Yeah, get it off your chest. I just got to get this off my chest. Well,
Exactly.
wow. So if I don't feel like they really heard me, then it stays on my chest. And how do you breathe with an elephant on your chest? What are the functions of the lungs, Lynn? I know you've mentioned with me privately like 6 or 7. What are they? This is super important for our health, our vitality, maybe even our future on the planet here.
So remember, guys, we take 20,000 breaths a day. That's 6 million breaths a year. And the inside of our lungs, if you took it and unfolded it all, is the size of half of a tennis court. Okay, so that's how important this is. And we all have to breathe. Once you stop, you're not here with us anymore. So the functions are a gas exchange. So you have to bring in carbon dioxide. And honestly, most people don't have a problem bringing it in. Where they have a problem is they can't expel the CO2, the carbon dioxide, enough to get the oxygen to come in. So that's a huge problem. regulating that blood pH. So the amount of that carbon dioxide that's in your lungs will determine or help to determine what that pH is in your blood. And we just talked about a high pH means high oxygenation. Phonation, so I have to have that airflow go by my voice box for speech. Pulmonary defense. You have to remember that this is really like our first line of defense. You have all these things that try to trap the foreign particles from the air that we breathe so it doesn't go any further. So we want our immune system in there working really well. Handling bioactive materials. So the lungs can metabolize a lot of things. So think of like anesthesia. If you go in for a
Right.
surgery, you have to metabolize that somehow. And so some of us can come out of anesthesia super quick, and other ones we're groggy and have problems for days and sometimes even weeks, right?
Yeah, and when the dentist, let's say you're getting your teeth worked on, they put that mask, you breathe it in, and immediately it numbs your mouth, your body. Your
Yep.
lungs have to process that, and it gets into our blood supply, I would assume.
Yep. And
Wow.
the next one was really a shocker for me. I guess I never really thought about it before, but that they filter small blood clots and air bubbles.
Oh, wow.
So, and this is so important, especially after COVID, because there's so many people that are having problems now from these microclots that are getting to their bones, getting to different parts of their bodies. So if your lungs can actually help to filter that out, then that's a huge bonus.
Yeah, you had shared with me, and I had heard a little bit about this, a really tragic story of a beautiful young woman that she had microclots in her bones. And I guess what was happening is the bones were actually dying. They
Yes.
were dying like in her body, which would I can't even imagine what's going to happen unless this can be, solved.
Yeah, so she already had her knees replaced, her hips replaced, partial
Oh,
shoulders replaced, and the latest was there was a bone that was just in her foot that wasn't in a joint that had died. And so, but can you imagine? We don't keep dead things in us, right? That's
oh
why
my
root canal
goodness.
is so bad, because they allow us to keep something dead in our mouth when it shouldn't be there. So it's then creating abscesses and other problems in the bodies that are
Oh my
making her
gosh.
kidneys and things shut down. So it's a very dangerous situation for this young lady.
And this is something, I mean, I don't know if this has ever happened before. It seems like just one of those, anomalies that are so common these days. They're not even anomalies anymore, right? Just so many weird things happening kind of as we navigate this environment. But that's very interesting about the blood clots. And we'll talk a little more about that. The other one I think is a blood reservoir. They can act as a blood reservoir. How
Yeah,
is
they
that?
have an immense amount of blood supply in them because we're oxygenating the blood as it goes through. So it's an immense amount. So it's kind of a reservoir there. And then the last piece is it adds warmth and moisture to the air. So we should always, I know for the longest time when I was young, because of all these bronchial issues, was a mouth breather. And that's not a good thing, because now all those pathogens make their way into your lungs and your lungs have to fight it, rather than if you are a nose breather. Your nose then will filter all those pathogens out. Your nose will be like a humidifier and warm the air and add moisture before it goes to the lungs, helping your lungs out. So it's much better for you to be a nose breather than a mouth breather.
I got to ask that question. How many of you are nose breathers or mouth breathers? And very curious about that. And I want to ask also, and we can just kind of share, have any of you experienced grief that then later affected your breathing, your respiratory health, or maybe something around how you slept? Maybe you started having like COPD issues. Let me know if something changed after grief or trauma. And Lynn, I want to jump to that real quick because the emotions that you've found in the lungs, and it's actually a pretty good body of energy work around this, are quite substantial. What are some of these emotions that could come up for people in their lung storage as a part of the body that might hold energy?
Remember, it can really be anything, because we all unconsciously pick different places. So where
Mm.
I might stick things is different than maybe someone else. But we have a tendency to do the whole sadness grouping in there. So sadness, grief, loss, abandonment, things like that. We can hold fear there. So like think of when something scares us, what do? We go and kind of hold that breath,
Yes.
right? So that affects our breathing. And then we become a shallow breather after that. We never get that diaphragm involved to get a nice deep breath that will help us get better oxygenation. So there's lots of different things. Traumas can do it, abuse can do it. There can be so many different things. And what I find is most people don't really realize in the quiz we put, are you a shallow breather, a deep breather, or a normal breather? So everybody just kind of take a second,
Ooh.
just stop and listen to yourself breathe and see, because you have to really be a deep breather sometimes so that you can force that CO2 out of your body so that you can actually get in more oxygen. People think that they just have to be able to and breathe in, but to be able to breathe in, you have to make sure you're expelling the carbon dioxide.
Yeah, we are getting just lit up with comments about pain and grief, and not just the lungs, but respiratory issues that they feel are connected to that. One person said, my sinuses have been very inflamed. And another person wrote in, yes, Sarah says, I've had lung issues after trauma, sinus problems after separation, perhaps from a relationship, I would assume. Burnout, says Guy, because of work. Gave me bronchitis. Louise, yes, after grief and trauma. So lots of connections we're making. So, the goal of these calls is to help people move into a new way of being. We're going to be doing a group activation in about probably 15 minutes, and we're going to take some callers. And if you are listening in on any one of the live streams on the social sites, you're going to want to really get the full call, because it's going to get pretty awesome as we start moving energy here. Lynn, the other interesting thing about what's happening is you're seeing things in the bodies shift in other ways. What are you seeing, and what really concerns you the most about where you're seeing humans go health-wise during these times?
In terms of the lungs, I'm just seeing more and more of the coughs. I'm seeing more and more of the COPD, which is just chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It just means that there's a block of airflow of some way, shape, or form. So everything that we're talking about, the bronchitis, the pneumonias, especially if they become chronic, emphysema. I know all of us on the call, I hope that none of us on the call have any of these things, but this is all about how do we prevent that? How do we get the lungs in a better situation so we don't have that? Because what is showing up is more and more lesions and more scar tissue. So just like you can have scar tissue from an injury or a surgery in your muscle, you can have scar tissue in your lungs. And a lot of times they'll call that interstitial lung disease or something like it. And what happens is when you have that scar tissue in your lungs, you can't get the breath. It can't
Yes.
process the air. So it's just like cirrhosis of the liver is lesions and fibrosis of the liver. This is lesions and fibrosis of your lungs. They're both just as detrimental because you're never going to get the airflow that you need. So a lot of people are having shortness of breath. So it kind of feeds into a lot of this autoimmune stuff that we've been talking about
Yes.
for a couple of months.
Yeah.
That's really kind of been the big umbrella.
Yeah, and so much of that's been on the rise, and we're gonna get to working some energy here to help folks, and we may get into some controversial topics again, and we're gonna get to a live activation process with everybody. If you are listening in, you're gonna want to check the link below. If you're on one of the live streams on one of the sites, you can catch the full interview. Lynn, this is just amazing. I want to go to maybe some questions from folks, and also want to help some folks out today. Let me know really quick what you are going through by commenting below. What is maybe the biggest challenge you're facing energetically or emotionally? Tell me a little bit about childhood and grief. And with that, I'm going to close the live stream, and then we are going to, of course, for us, nothing's going to change. But tell me about childhood and grief, Lynn, and what you're seeing. How many issues trace back to childhood that are connected to the lungs?